Season 1 was about transformation, realizing you can love your life and break free from stories that held you back. Now, in Season 2, we're stepping in a new frequency. What transformation looks like in real life. The messy middle. The real, raw conversations. If you're ready to live your truth, let's talk. This is Jessica Javens Talk Podcast, Season 2. I am so excited to be here in beautiful Indianapolis, the city of artists. And you know, last time I was here, Season 1, it was so cold. I'm from Florida, so for me, that hurts my bones. It was hard to go outside for any amount of time. And here I am stepping in summertime because this season is coming out in fall. And I was so pleasantly surprised. It almost feels like Florida. Anyways, it was so cool that as soon as I arrived here, I felt so welcomed. I went to the Meetup event. I saw some artists that I met last season, and I met many more. Some of them will be on this season. You guys cannot miss it. By the way, do your part in sharing this with your friends and family because everybody deserves. What are we doing? Why? Because we talked about transformation last season, and we're going to continue with that. However, this season, we're going to go deeper, bolder, and intimate. And you deserve to love your life as well as anybody that you know. So please make sure you're doing your part by sharing this episode with your friends and family. And I am so happy that the guest that I have here today finally came on. I've been trying to get her to come on since last season, and I am so thrilled because she is very, very open, just like I promised you on this season. And she's going to share a lot of stuff that we've talked about because, yeah, she's my friend too. She's an amazing person. So I'd like to welcome Sonja Raubeson. Welcome so much for coming. Thank you. Thank you. Sonja, let me tell you just a little bit about why she's so special. She's a licensed beauty professional. She's a content creator. She is a business coach. And she's the founder of I Love Beauty, like IYE Love Beauty, co-creator of Locket Jewels. And one of the most amazing things is that through the worst time of her life, she was able to come out of that and create also the Chase Passion LLC. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. You cannot miss it. So welcome, Sonja. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Jess. I'm so happy to be with you, to be here, to share with you. A little nervous, but I'm excited to be with you and to be part of your podcast.
Yes, thank you so much for coming. So we're talking about how beauty came from breaking today, how you actually were able to come out of limiting beliefs, stop doing things or believing in things that no longer serve you, and how pain and trauma actually help you to become now a person who helps people to be beautiful on the outside, but also on the inside, which I am totally into that. So let's begin. Tell me a little bit about, let's start from the top, where you are today with what you're doing and how you're able to help people with all of these different things that you have going on.
Okay, well, today I'm actually pivoting. So you did talk about Chase Passion LLC, which is sort of my umbrella, if you will. It's a partnership with my late son, which I suppose is me going backwards before I go forwards, but we could talk about that after. So that's a partnership with my son. It's my legacy, if you will. My business is, to me, a living, breathing reflection, sometimes of even what's going on inside, but definitely a reflection of that and a legacy of touching people and just trying to meet others where they're at. So I'm pivoting out of that business that you mentioned because it is a brick and mortar location, and I've just sort of run my course with that location. And I'm moving more into content creation and social media work because that allows me for more flexibility to get rid of that overhead and to potentially touch more people, which ultimately I think is really what I'm called to do.
Absolutely. And that's why I wanted you to come on the show so you can share that. So let's start talking about how you were able to come and talk to us about some of the most sensitive things that a lot of people sometimes don't even want to talk about. So let's go there. You're open, you're bold. So start sharing with me. How did your life begin? How did that look like?
Who? Oh, okay. So now I feel like I have to lie back on the couch, right? Let me tell you, when I was a little girl, actually not really good beginnings. I think from the outside it probably looked okay. I went to a private school. Even though I was being raised by a single mom, I went to a private school. So I had some sort of outside things that looked very well, but it was really a facade. My home was highly abusive. My mother's a drug addict. She was involved in, and still to this day, is actively involved in not only drug usage, but she sells and deals in drugs. She spent time in and out of jail. She's an active alcoholic. So growing up in that sort of environment, it was really chaotic. She was involved with abusive men. So there was a lot of varying levels of abuse. And I also think, just generationally speaking, like I don't want to sit here and do like a let me bash my mother sort of thing. But I think generationally speaking, that generation of baby boomers is really a very, they were difficult in terms of being parents. I mean, they really weren't loved themselves. And, they came from post-war mothers who gave their infants baby, or, gave their infants medication to sleep through the day so they could leave them and go to work. So, I know that generationally speaking, there's a lot of damage there in that generation. And I know she didn't see it, and she definitely continued to carry it forward. So it was just really difficult. I think I spent most of my young years wanting out, just out of life and out of that environment. I always said, from my earliest memories, I don't want to be this. And I remember I shared that with you, what that meant to
Mm.
me, because this was very encompassing. It meant a lot of things. I didn't want to speak in that vernacular. I didn't want to eat my food that same way. I didn't want to carry myself that way. I didn't want to walk like that. There were so
Wow.
many variables. And it was tough. It was a very tough relationship with her. I loved her very deeply. It's my mother.
Of
So it
course.
was a lot of years of trying to get from a person what she was incapable of delivering. And from there, I think it just speaks. I think that oftentimes when you're in a lower socioeconomic place and you're in a household that's abusive, it is probably very common to carry forth those similar patterns, or to have, or to follow certain paths or make decisions like I made that maybe weren't the best. I didn't have anyone else, I
Right.
didn't have anyone involved in guiding me. And
And
I
your
had
father wasn't present, was he?
not at all.
No.
No, he
Yeah.
he and my mother were married briefly when I was a baby, and he left when I was very young.
Wow.
He was
So you
young
only
himself.
had her.
Yeah,
Um,
and he never stayed in touch. So I became a teen mother. I dropped out of
That's
high
what I was going
school.
to say. So it's interesting that you were so aware that that's not the path that you wanted, because you could have reacted in so many different ways, right? That's, some of the stories you shared with me are pretty traumatic about what you went through. I have the images in my head of all of the different stories that you shared, and it's pretty traumatic. And how you were perceptive enough, and what helps you to be completely different than that is amazing. But you did become a teen mom. So tell us about that challenge.
Um, there's a lot of elements of my story that it took a lot of years to be able to say in an honest way, because again, I came from a home where nothing was what it seemed. And when you spoke the truth, you were lying. So there was a lot of those types of messages anyway. So my daughter's story is one that I always say I had to share it with her before I would ever share it out there. And I did with her growing up so that she knew, because it would feel unfair to talk about it otherwise. But becoming a teen mom was something no one knew. So when I say that, I mean, no one knew I was pregnant. The day that my daughter was born, I was getting ready to go to school like a normal day. And I,
What
my
grade
mother
were
had
you in? Do
actually,
you remember?
pardon?
What grade were you in?
I was a junior.
Okay.
So I just turned 17. I was like, getting up for the day, that sort of thing. My mother had been out partying and gone for 2 or 3 nights before, and I had a little brother that was 2, so I often took care of him. So, he's doing his thing and I'm trying to get ready and I'm in labor. And it progressed that my mother, I had to go crawl into her room and try to not wake her too much and ask if I could stay home from school, which I did. And then when she kind of eventually in the afternoon woke a little bit, she even looked at me like, because I was in so much pain, I wasn't really dressed or anything that day. And so I remember I had a robe on and she had looked at my stomach and was like pushing on it. And like, it felt hard to her. And she was like, I think your appendix is bursting. So then
Oh
she just,
my goodness.
yes. So then she took me to the hospital. We went to the ER. It was like a 30-minute drive. I remember all of it, like being incredibly in pain, but I was so relieved that my mother knew what was wrong, right? Like, oh, thank God, it's just my appendix bursting. And this I share because I think that people don't understand these sorts of things when you say, if I said I didn't know I was pregnant, I think when you're a teenager, the level of denial that you can live in is very real. My ability as an adult to compartmentalize is not what it was when I was a kid. I was
Wow.
much more adept at compartmentalizing and like putting something away and being like, that just doesn't exist. And that's really how I dealt with it. I had never been pregnant, so I hadn't experienced pregnancy. So the things that I had, like people say, well, the baby moved, right? But I had never experienced that before. And I
True.
was on a slim fast diet. So she was very tiny and it felt like butterflies. So when I went to the hospital, I was just relieved, feeling like, oh, thank God, I'm not pregnant. And, my mom knows it's appendicitis and that's what it's going to be. So when I get to the ER, right away, they're asking me things like, am I sexually active? And they're asking me in front of my mother and they're asking, like, should she leave? And I'm feeling like really confident in the whole situation. So I'm like, no, she doesn't have to leave. I'm not having
Oh
sex.
my goodness.
So it was the moment that they brought in the fetal monitor, and I don't know what, I suppose because they're doctors and they know, right? So they bring in the fetal monitor, and my mother had just had a baby 2 years before, so they put this on my stomach, and is the noise, and I don't know what it is, but she did, and they immediately brought me in to labor. I was in full blown labor. My daughter was born within an hour of me being in the hospital, so it was that fast, and my mother was right away talking with the physician that was there of like, we're not keeping this baby. Like, find somebody, do something, but we're not keeping this baby. And that was really my daughter's beginning. And back when she was born, that was 91. Like, you spent a few days in the hospital. So I was there for days and I had heard my mother say that. And knowing where I came from, I knew it was up to my mother. I live with her.
How did you
So
feel when you heard that?
I I don't remember feeling anything, Jess. I don't think that, again, that's the ability that I had with compartmentalizing
I
things.
see.
It was whatever she wanted. My fear of my mother was greater than anything else.
Wow.
So, like, I'll backtrack, and I know this is an offshoot of a story, but I know I've shared with you there was a time. So at this point, I have this baby, I'm 17, but my memories of her are things like I was maybe 10 years old when she picked me up early from school one day, and I'm all excited, like, oh, I get to get out of school.
Yeah.
She brought me to a bar, and we stayed there until 2 a.m. the next day. And I was with her when she was arrested, and she gave me her purse during that arrest and said, don't give this to the police. And there was drugs inside of it, and I knew that. She dealt with cocaine, so I knew it was in there at that age, and I knew what it was. And the police didn't call CPS. They brought me with her to the precinct, and I sat in the front of the precinct all night long until she had her time and could get out. And I had that purse, and I thought about it all night long. Like, I wanted to turn it in. I knew what was in there, but my fear of her was greater because she had shown me that she could get out of any situation, but I couldn't. And I knew that if I turned that in, that my life was at risk. So that's what my life had been like. So
And
when
you
I'm
were
in
at
the
the bar, just a
hospital,
little thing, because this is a picture I have in my mind. You were at that bar until 2 a.m. the next day, and she did not sleep a second because she was drinking and having drugs that whole time, and she didn't sleep,
correct.
right? Oh,
Yes.
man.
Yeah.
Okay, continue.
Yeah. So, and that's just one of many, and that's actually a tame situation, right? So my whole thing was very insecure, and I was very obviously dependent on her. I'm a child, right? So I knew if she said that this baby isn't coming home with us, then that's the way it was
That was
going to
it.
be. Yes, that was it. So I'm there for a couple of days, and the pediatrician had come in, and I was not seeing the baby. Like nowadays, the baby stays in the room with you, but then they stayed in the nursery. And so I didn't see her, I didn't feed her. And my pediatrician came, and he was so happy and proud, like letting me know, it really was a risk. I had no prenatal care. I wasn't eating well because I was trying to lose weight because I was gaining weight. So, my
Wow.
nutrition was poor and all these things. And he was like, you have this very healthy baby. You should be so happy. She's got all of these things. And then he said to me, and I'll never forget it. He's like, and he said, my mother was 16 when I was born. And look at me, I'm a doctor.
Wow.
And I had no emotion. I didn't cry, but I remember looking back at him and I said, but what will I be?
I got
And
goosebumps right now. Man.
yeah, that's how I felt because I knew where I came from. What am I going to do with this person? She's a person. So anyway, fast forward, I think it was the day after that, my mother phoned me in the hospital and she asked me right away in the conversation, had I thought of a name for her? And I knew in that moment that was her way of saying it was my decision. Um, and then
What
I brought her
changed?
into my room. Oh, well, at the time I didn't know, but I know now. My auntie, who's her younger sister, who you also know I'm very close to,
Very close to, yeah.
my auntie was a teen mom as well. And I think my auntie had been faced with something very similar as a situation or a decision. And she told my mother that it was not her decision to make, that she could not do that, that it,
Look at the power of having the right person come in your life like that.
yeah,
It changed
at
your
the
life
right.
completely, that probably that one conversation that they had.
That conversation changed everything. My
Wow.
daughter definitely would have been, there were many people interested in having her at the time. So it 100%. And of course, there's elements of me that wonder, would she have maybe had a better space, a better life, a better whatever? She had the potential of being a physician's child. So instead of, the baby of a teen mom. And maybe it could have been better. I think those things now as an adult to look back, because you only want like the absolute best for your children. And
Mhm.
anything that she would say, to me about being a negative, well, then I hope that you can take that and make it better. I just want you to do everything better. So I do
Right.
think about that. But that was kind of the beginning there. And she did let me bring her home. And I'll often, I say much of my, trying to do this without tears, much of my, strength, my resilience, my determination. I know it was there, it was in me. But after having her, the responsibility was so much greater and it catapulted me. Um, Again, I'm
Tell us
in
a
this
little bit about that.
situation.
How did
I'll
it
tell you,
catapult you?
I brought her home. We were living in my mother's home, who was not expecting to take a girl to the hospital and come home with a baby. And so, there's those layers too. And she's in active addiction and she's in an abusive relationship. She has her own layers in life that was happening. And she has a 2-year-old. So she had been gone. I think my daughter was around 3 weeks old. I still wasn't back in school or anything. I was seeing a tutor and, my mother had been gone for, I think, 4 nights, something excessive. And she was still nursing my brother at the time, and not like for nutrition, but he's 2, and so he needed it for comfort and that sort of thing. And she'd been gone for days. And I have an infant of my own, and I'm
Oh,
trying to do high school.
That is
So
insane.
it was insane. When she came back home this one particular night, again, it's one of those pivotal memories I'll never forget. It was a decision maker for me. She got home, it was just after 2 in the morning, and it was the first time ever in my life that it must have been the mama bear, right? It was the first time I ever spoke out to her or had the ability to feel very upset at her. And I was upset that she'd left my brother that long. There wasn't always food. It was just, there was a lot of things. I was very upset. And I had a baby too. So I just felt, all of these emotions at once. So when she came in high and drunk, I confronted her. And it probably was a mistake because she has an incredible amount of strength. And I like to think that I'm somebody who has a mouth, but I don't have a fight, and certainly not against her. So anyway, she became very violent with me to the point that I've had a couple of times in my life with her where I really looked into her eyes and I knew she wasn't there, that she was vacant, and that she had the ability to take my life.
Oh my
I've
God.
had moments like that, and this was one. And most of the time in the past, I didn't fight that. Honestly, as a child, I didn't care. I wanted to leave life. So when this was happening in this moment, and I had stood up to her, and it had gone on, like by the time she had grabbed me, I had already said things like, I'm going to call the police, or I'm going to tell the neighbors. And by then she had grabbed a hold of me. And when she did, and she got me to the ground, and she was on top of me, and she was choking me and like banging my head to the floor. And it was severe. It wasn't like we're just wrestling around. I felt every bit that she had the capability to take my life. And all that I could think about was my baby, and that she would then have the ability to do this to my baby. And I had made it this far. I just can't let her harm another person.
Oh my
So I
God.
started begging her for water and telling her she was right. When I could catch a breath, I was just asking her for water. And I don't remember at what point it stopped, but it did. And she passed out. And I packed trash bags. And I had a girlfriend. We didn't have cell phones then, so I had to get a hold of a girlfriend of mine. And I out my bedroom window threw my trash bags and my baby and then me, and I left. And I didn't talk to her. My friend's family helped me and really protected me for a few months because I needed that. I needed a buffer between myself and my mother.
Absolutely.
She had an ability to, like any abuser, it was like the first time, most of the time, the abuse that I had, especially physical, would result in things that you couldn't see. There was only a few times when something happened where it was visual, that you could see it. And that was a time, like having a black eye or something like that. So in those moments when she had to see it too, or when she had to make an excuse for me because I maybe couldn't go to school or I couldn't go to work, then she would be very apologetic, and not necessarily saying it wouldn't happen again, but she would be apologetic, and she would make it so that she was the victim. And in the end, even though she was apologizing for having hurt me, I would feel bad and would, flip, always end up like, you don't need, it's not your fault, or you don't have to apologize, or whatever. I always felt like really she was that somehow I had made it happen.
She turned it
So
around.
yeah, I did. So I really needed that family to step in there and to help just sort of cut off communication for a little bit, which they did do. And then I went back into high school, and it just, it went down from there. She took away my brother for a while, and we just had a lot of things. And I guess really it just paved the way, Jess, for a lot of various traumas. And I shared with you how most of my adult life, after severing from that and being able to pull myself away, I kept it sort of very facade or surface. I think I had a lot of people who
Was
knew
that
me.
like was that like a way to protect yourself in a way? Was that how you
It
found that
was
you could
shame. It was,
shame?
um, I carried a lot of guilt and I learned that guilt is shame. And it's true. And it was shame. I was very shameful of where I had come from. I was shameful of who my mother was, of the things that she did. I was shameful of her past. Um, and I felt like all of those things were a reflection upon me. I felt that, I don't know if I felt that maybe I could have, if I were a better person or a better daughter. I don't know if that's where it stemmed from, but I definitely felt responsible for it. And I felt that if I shared it with you or anyone else, if I had said, that my mother was an addict or that I was a teen mom, like I never talked about my age. People would just assume I was whatever age because I always sort of presented myself maybe more mature or older than I was.
Uh-huh.
And even that I was shameful of. To say I was pregnant at 16, I felt shame from that.
So, Sonja, there was many years that you carried that shame and that facade, like you mentioned, but there was something huge that happened in your life that changed that, and it was
Yes.
something completely unexpected. I would love for you to tell us a little bit about one of the most traumatic moments in your life.
April 6th, 2016. Uh, very normal day. It started off. I was at the height of my career. I was working for a hair care manufacturer. I was all over the country. I had done a lot of international travel. I definitely felt like, especially for someone who'd grown up the way I had, I felt like I had made it. I was a platinum level on all these different airlines. I felt like, when I would roll up, like, oh, move out of my way. I'm here to get my seat. Like for me and where I had come from, it felt a big deal to be able to travel like that, to have business cards with my name
Mm-hmm.
on it, an office with a door. So I'm at the height of this sort of place in my life. I was in a relationship I'd been in for a couple of years. We just moved into a big, beautiful home. I'd never lived in anything like that. I remember when we looked at it, I was like, I felt like I was in a dream. I shouldn't be there. I was an
Uh-huh.
imposter. And I was having furniture delivered that day. And my mother, I should add that I no longer have a relationship with her, but at the time I did. So my mother was in town because I was proud and I wanted her to see. So I brought her in town for a visit. I'm having furniture delivered. We'd had our nails done and she was going to get picked up by my daughter. When we were waiting for her, I got a phone call in my car from my ex-husband. That's my children's dad. And he never calls me. As you know, I said my ex-husband, right? We don't have that kind of relationship. He never calls me. But his father has had issues with cancer. So just inside of me, I sort of had that immediate assumption he was calling about his dad.
Okay.
But also I must have just sensed, I don't know, whatever, you look back in hindsight, because I didn't take the phone call on speaker. I picked it up private, which
Uh,
isn't like me, but I
okay.
did. And he called to say that there had been a shooting in our son's office. Our son at the time was 23 and he was working in a criminal defense law firm in downtown St. Paul as a law clerk. He was getting ready to enter law school in the fall. So that was the first phone call. It was just that there was a shooting and he really wasn't aware of what had happened. He wasn't 100% sure if Chase was even shot. But I remember him telling me, like, maybe he's going to need a surgery or something. And I also remember feeling very calm. Like to me, I felt like I was like this, right? Like I always had been,
Uh-huh. Right.
that I was calm. And then I left, my daughter got picked up. I remember in my mind being calm to her, like, there's a shooting, we're not sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to be alone. I think that's how I've always been. So although my daughter was there and I really should have gravitated to her, I didn't. I wanted everything to go as it was planned, like pick up your grandmother, take her, do this
Uh-huh.
and do that. And I started to drive home and I did make some phone calls. I called my boss with my job and just, again, in my mind, I thought I was calm. That I said that I thought there was a shooting. I didn't know what, but later hearing back, I wasn't calm. And then I was supposed to, with the person I was involved with, we had a date planned that night. So I called him and I too am thinking I'm calm. And he later was like, I couldn't understand anything you were saying. And I felt like
Wow.
I was completely calm. I got home and it was probably a series of several phone calls. And I remember starting to pack a suitcase. And as I was packing the suitcase, I had this one particular dress that I always felt very good in. It was a black dress that I wore for work a lot. And I remember when I picked it up to pack it. And I remember folding it thinking, in case I need to go to a funeral. And what a horrible thought. And why would I think that? Like, he just needs a surgery. But I remember thinking it and putting it and taking it back out and putting it back in. I was just pacing around a lot.
Uh-huh.
And then the final call, my ex-husband had called me, and he had delivered the news that well, actually, let me back that up. Before, right in the moment of the phone call happening, my partner was sitting in our bedroom and he was looking at his cell phone, which I remember in the moment was irritating me. I was so irritated with him. And he looked up at me and he said, "How many people were shot?" And I was so pissed. How could he ask me that? Sorry for swearing, but I was just so angry. How could he ask me something so stupid? I'm going to swear again because I was like, who gives a my son could have been shot, right? And so that's what I remember, almost starting to scream it back to him. And I think I did. And that's the moment that the phone rang.
Uh-huh.
And it was my ex-husband. And the reason he was asking me how many people had been shot, because I never thought to look on social media. I never thought to look it up. I never thought any of that. I was making phone calls, like I was calling my aunt and asking her to call the hospital. And I remember her calling me back and saying, they say he's not there and they can't say anything because they have to protect the shooter. And I just thought, none of this makes sense. So later, now it all comes to why everyone had the information they had. My partner was asking who else had been shot because it was already on the news that there was a fatal shooting. And so in that moment, my ex-husband called. He was calling to say that Chase had been shot 5 times and that he didn't. Oh, sorry. That still gets me. That he didn't survive. So.
Oh, Sonja.
I'm sorry.
No.
That was the pivotal moment in my life. I didn't recognize it then, but I do now. That I couldn't be that facade anymore. I didn't have the capability.
You didn't have the capability of what?
I just didn't have the capability of being that facade. That's who I had been before. I had been really a facade. This thing that I wanted to present to the world. This image that was hopefully closer to perfection than the image that I came from. I wanted to hide every bit of that, anything and everything that had happened to me. I wouldn't want anyone to know. I no longer had the ability to do that. I couldn't hold it up anymore. I was so broken. I was beyond broken. I remember saying it repeatedly. I would say, I'm so broken. I'm so broken. I'm like sand. And I remember, like, it's this bizarre feeling of, I almost felt like I was scooping myself up and I could feel myself falling from between my fingers. I couldn't even hold on to myself. And grief is strange. Like, even now, I'm now 9 years removed from that moment. It's as if it were 9 seconds ago.
Wow.
It's right here. And I think that's why I can't hold the facade anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Always right now on the surface is just how broken that I am. That we all are, probably.
Yes.
But I just don't have,
mm-hmm.
I just don't have the ability anymore to hold it together. And it also changed me in ways I think that was always there. I feel as though I was always a person who, an example would be this. With my children, I always said, I remember what it's like to be a kid. I've never forgotten that. All the spaces that I've been in, whether it was because I was hungry or I was hurt or I was cold or whatever it might have been, or I was a child and I was helpless, or later in life, like wherever I had been, whatever space, I've not forgotten those things. And I didn't forget it, but I just didn't want it. Maybe I didn't want it to have to be me, like there was the separation that maybe it was a little more fairy tale than what it was, but I couldn't do that anymore. And I'm not sure what I was going to make on a point on that one. I suppose I got caught up in the emotion, but that's
Yeah.
really it. I just couldn't hold it up anymore. That facade of like who I wanted everyone to think I was. I wanted this level of perfection because I didn't want to be like her.
And
It
you're not
was,
like her. You're not like her. And that's the one thing that I think is so amazing is how you were able to come out of all of this. And I know that you had some steps that you took after Chase was no longer here. And I wanted you to share that little bit in the last couple of minutes that we have. What were pivotal to helping you to become now this person who is true to yourself, who has always been beautiful on the outside, but now more than ever, beautiful on the inside, where you inspire every person that you meet, every person that sits on your chair, that you help. And you've helped me throughout the years of being there. I saw you seeing that girl in the parking lot who was crying. You immediately went out there to help her. You have this huge heart and you're amazing. So tell us a little bit, how were you able to come out of that and be able to be who you are today?
well, I think that me has always been there, right? Those were always things that I would do. But having lost him really made me realize we need each other. I became involved with a group because my partner found it. So, really thankful to him. It's a horrible group, Parents of Murdered Children. It's literally called that. And he
Wow.
took me right away when we came back from my son's funeral. And he noticed a woman in the room of this meeting that he thought you should connect with her. And he went up to her and he told her, you need to talk to her. And that was pivotal. It was pivotal for me because even though everyone in my family was mourning and grieving the same person, it wasn't the same.
Mm-hmm.
And being in a group among other parents who had felt the same thing that I had felt. And I realized that child loss happens in a lot of different ways, right? Like you could lose a baby in utero, you could have a child who's ill, you could have an accident. There's so many
Mm-hmm.
different things, and it doesn't take away that pain. But I felt as though all these people in this group understood the different heavier layers because someone else had chosen to take his life. And it's
Yeah.
just very different. The levels of anger that you could feel, or like it, I think it really had to take a moment for me to embrace I need to be loving and I need to continue to love
Mm.
and not seek vengeance on the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm proud that I could stay soft and not do that. But that group was helpful. And I didn't like go all the time or necessarily stay involved, but when I felt particularly low, I could go. And if I felt like saying something that felt off the wall and terrible to someone who hadn't experienced this in that room, always there was someone who would say, yes, and I know how that feels. And that's huge in this human experience. We are not meant to be alone. I used to tell people when I was speaking in cosmetology that you're very powerful. They often feel, and I was that way too, because I came from a lower socioeconomic background, which a lot of people in cosmetology and beauty do. They often feel kind of less than and whatnot and not powerful. So I used to say, listen, there's two people in the world that are licensed to touch you, your doctor and your hairstylist. Okay. You're licensed to touch human beings. And that's a beautiful thing. We're meant to be touched and hugged and interactive. Like, think about how many people that spend time alone that the only person who has touched or hugged them is someone like me, right? Their stylist, someone like that. So anyway, I felt like those groups are important, but ultimately there's not a white horse coming to save you. And we have to make that decision ourselves. I
That's
shared
right.
with you that one of the things that I used to do right in opening, and I might have gone on too long, but
Yes, I can't
I
wait.
would I would have people write down. I want you to write on the top of a piece of paper, people are. And then write 1, 2, and 3. And then don't think about it. Just really quick. What do you think people are? Just 3 things. Boom, boom, boom. Write them down. And then I would ask people to share. Like, so what are they? And I would often share what mine were. And often mine would repeat the same. They would be things like broken, vulnerable, and not enough. And I would share that. And they would go, wow. Because sometimes people would write things like people are assholes or they're liars. And some would write good things. People are this and people are that. But oftentimes we write kind of some negative things, but those would be mine. Broken, vulnerable, shattered.
Sure.
I would write those things. And then I would say, okay, now after you've shared, I want you to cross off people are. Just cross it off and write I am. Because more times than not, our thoughts, right? It's just that internal thing and we're reflecting it out there. I don't believe that we truly have hatred for one another. I think that we are not loving ourselves. I think I spent so many years pouring into cups that were too shallow to hold me, that I put love in the way that I wanted to be loved into things that didn't have that capability.
Wow.
So I've just learned that, yes, I think we need other people and we need groups and we need it where we can get it, but sometimes you can't. And maybe it's a podcast like this, or maybe it's reading a book or hearing someone else's story, but we all have things. And I think we're carrying much more than anyone else realizes. And the best way through it is, I think, to share it. You're as sick as your secrets. And if we don't get it out there and share with one another, how are you going to be able to love yourself? I couldn't love myself with all that shame and guilt. I just couldn't.
No,
I didn't feel worthy.
And this is something that most people around the world who watch this will resonate with. So thank you for sharing that. That's absolutely amazing. What is next for you, Sonja?
So next for me, I'm pivoting out of my brick and mortar business and I'm focusing more on content creation and social media. And hopefully that will help me to spread those wings and be more about giving that message and maybe touching other people. I froze. Or you froze.
So you're looking to giving more back. And you're right. That way you can reach people, not just locally where you are, right, in Florida right now, but you can reach people all around the world. So much more empowering. How can people reach out to you? Where can they find
so
you?
people can reach out to me. I have a portfolio that's up, so you can get me there at sonjacreates.com or sonjacreatesugc.com, or I'm on LinkedIn as Sonja Raubeson and all your other social handles.
Awesome. I am so honored to have you here and that you were able to share these impactful stories where people can relate in this world that we live in, but also believe that the power that lives within them is far greater than they can imagine. And they just have to not to give up and keep going and finding that right support system, that the people who have the ability to do that with you, not the wrong crowd, not the wrong people, but the right kind of people. And together, absolutely, we are stronger. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you. I love you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Keep shining the way you are. And I'm grateful to have you in my life. Thank you. This is Jessica Javens Talk, and this show is brought by Forever Living, the aloe vera juice that changed my wellness, and also Through the Vine, the best wine bar in Fort Lauderdale, and produced by the I Am Beast Network. This is Jessica Javens Talk, and this is Jessica, Season 2. Share this with everyone, and I'll see you on the next episode.
Let's talk. This is Jessica Javens Talk.